Part 5. The recording. This recording was produced 2 years ago, before the incident. For your sake, please do not restate this to anyone. It started when they arrived. These people came up to someone and asked, "Would you like to be part of something bigger?" The man who never shows his face said. The disc's documentation suddenly ended. I knew why. The government had redacted the rest of it. A mental fog descended even as the elevator ascended. Simultaneously, my guardian angel signaled, "Something's wrong." I exited the elevator, rushed to my unit, and grabbed a uniform from the bedroom closet. I knew Neo would be at the local moon box, and I retrieved him. We ran back to LK base, where red lights were flashing overhead, and a robotic voice repeated over the public address system, "Reactor meltdown in Sector 913B. All personnel head to the evacuation center." A wooden sign above the back entry to HQ flashed, "Worship God Box Brewery." Faintly pressed into the sign was a pentagram. A few kids ran to the reactor. Everything was collapsing into anti-space, that area between reality and the universe. However, my derealization state began to dissipate. A neon sign flashed, "A cult has infiltrated LK." Neo and I stood between the LK Art Gallery and the room containing the reactor, which was housed on 3 floors, B1, 1, and 2. Did Neo's picture in the LK Art Gallery spawn the reactor meltdown? No. Impossible, I thought. I put the most senior LK in charge of the meltdown crisis, called my superiors at Army HQ, and briefed them. Then they asked for Neo. He got on the line. "Major Coughlin, Space Force Attaché Delta Force, USA Special Operations Command, Ranger Qualified Sharpshooter, sir." I could hear his answers. "Fort Benning," he said. I whispered, "It's Fort Moore." "Fort Moore, sir," he said into the phone. Then he said, "Fort Bragg, sir." I kicked him in the shins and whispered, "It's Fort Liberty." He looked at me with a quizzical expression. The Army bases had been renamed by opposing forces inside the Army, the same forces now engaged in the suppression of the American people, against which our mission had been set. "They're verifying you," I communicated in sign language. "Fort Liberty, sir." The call ended. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah." He said something about internal forces. He was reminding you of the forces rewriting history. Neo. Think. Think. At that moment Salem came out of an elevator. "When did you get here?" I asked. "This morning. I lifted off at 0400 hours. I spotted the infiltrator, the leader of Worship God Box Brewery," she said. "Great. You are so convenient for worldwide operations," I said. "Thanks a lot." She looked up at the ceiling, "Well, away from us." "Yeah, how do you manage a home in Hollywood and one here in Sacramento, sweetie?" Neo sniffed her long black hair and natural brown highlights. The sweet Catholic girl embodied death itself as she swiftly traveled between Los Angeles Air Force Base and Mather Air Force Base. Salem favored her hands over other weapons. Without any helping hands, the serial justice killer had gathered the human spines needed to construct her home on top of the first O in the Hollywood sign. "You didn't hear me. I saw the man who never shows his face," she said. "What? Who?" I asked. "When he left the chapel 5 minutes ago, he did not bless himself with the sign of the cross," she said. "The government redacted recording," I said. A puzzled look flashed across her beautiful face. She held my arm and said, "I want you nearby in case things should go wrong." "You got it. What's the plan?" I asked. "You know the case of Nowlat Reserve gin that Neo got in Holland on his solo excursion 1 year ago. When Neo came home, he told me that his mission was to obtain a rare vintage of Nowlat. Never before had the maker made miniatures. I half believed him, but now I can use one." Neo scratched his head. "How do I look, Salem?" "What?" "Pay attention to what I'm about to tell you." "I'm listening," he said. "Follow me," she said. We rode the elevator up to their unit and watched her look around, and from under the bed she extracted one tiny airplane bottle, the nips, the miniatures, 50 milliliters. She broke the seal. We smelled warm spicy saffron and subtle delicate verbena. Looking first at Neo, and then at the label, she read aloud, "Precious botanicals are individually distilled to yield the highest concentration and purity of natural flavors and aromas." She turned the miniature around and laughed a muffled laugh. Complex, unforgettable flavor with a long-lasting final impression. Gently, she lifted a silver jigger from the nightstand and poured the contents of the sweet gin into it. "Smells delicious," she remarked. In the process, a tiny crack on the jigger pricked her finger. Her delicate white flesh looked tasty to a vampire, but neither I nor Neo were vampires. She sucked her finger for a minute. Then, out of her uniform's pocket came a vial. "Paul, this little thing contains sodium pentothal powder." She emptied the vial into the jigger. "That's a double shot." She poured the jigger into the gin miniature bottle. She closed the cap and shook the miniature to make sure the gin and powder were mixed. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "You'll find out." She placed the miniature bottle on the nightstand. She stepped over to the full-length mirror and smoothed 5 feet of hair with a comb, saying, "Preparing myself for the mission, the assault." Neo said, "The girls in her 4th grade class at Convent of the Sacred Heart School picked out a pink Cinderella craycomb for her thick tresses, 9 inches short of the buffed floor Salem is standing on." Salem added, "The boys next door wanted an emerald green comb to match my eyes, but the girls, who are my official students, outnumbered the boys by 1. Neo boasted, but all agreed that her deathly pale complexion and slim vigorous body complemented the hoary mane. She asked me to leave the bedroom. When she emerged she was in a white negligee. "Paul, follow me." "You too, darling." We arrived on the 19th floor. An LK commander standing outside the helmet shop informed us that the reactor meltdown had been quelled. The helmet shop was closed and dark.